this section. And in this section, we're going to be Dockerizing a full stack application. We're going to be getting our hands dirty, so to speak. So this is what the application is going to look like. Basically, this is going to be like a simple shopping website and this is a workflow. It's going to be like a simple web client that makes a GET request to get a list of products from a backend service. And once it gets a list of products, it's going to render them on that stuff. So that's what the application is, and we're going to be going step by step and seeing how to put this in Docker, right? So prerequisites. Now, while the concepts we're going to share here can apply to other languages like maybe Python, Java, or whatever it is you're using, for this demo, I'm using like a JavaScript application. So you would need Node.js installed, right? Good. So you have to have Node.js installed. Now, of course, you have to have Docker installed, right? And I assume you would have to be able to do that. And the last thing I would recommend is having the Docker graphical user interface. You can skip this, but I'll show you what I mean by graphical user interface. So when I say Docker graphical user interface, I'm talking about Docker desktop. You could follow along without this, but I think this is nice to have because while we're going to be doing a lot of stuff with a terminal, it's good to also just like get, a good picture, right? So yeah, we'll move on from building, specifying our Docker file down to like building images. As you can see, like a list of images here, and then would run containers, right? All right, friends. Yeah, let's jump in. So now let's get a quick overview of what our code looks like. Basically, we have a Docker cost directory. In this directory, we have like the web client and we have the backend, right? Like I said, the client is just a simple React.js application, right? With your source and everything. And the backend is built with Nest.js. So figure source, basically, this is going to, when we start this is going to be running on port 4200. And it has like a controller that is going to intercept every GET request that comes to /products. And if we go into, and this controller basically calls like a product service. So if we go in here, this just returns like a list of shoes for now. This is dummy data. So for this first session, we're not using like a database. This is just returning dummy data for now, right? But the idea is, like I said, would apply. All right. If you're coming now, it doesn't matter if you can use Nest.js or not. The same ideas once again would apply to if you're using Express or something else, right? So yeah, I have my terminal open, so I'll just go in and I'll start the application first. So I'm in this Docker cost directory. Let's say ls to list the contents of the directory. So first, I'd like to start the backend application. So if I say cd backend. All right. So I'm in a backend directory, so I would just say npm run start dev to run it in dev mode. So this is going to start our Nest.js application, and remember it's running on port 4000. So if I, for example, went to, sorry, so if I went to my browser and said 4200, sorry, /product. So you see that we're already getting like a list of products, right? So this is just a simple GET request. So let's start the web application. Start a React. Go to like a new terminal and so once again, I'm in the Docker cost directory. So ls cd client -web. And all right, guys, so I opened a new terminal and I'm in the client web, that's client web directory. So let's say ls, so okay, yeah, we're there. So I'll just run the application, start the React.js application. So I'll say run start, npm run start. This is going to start like a React, so it's open the server on this port. So let's just copy this and go to our browser. All right, cool. So this is what our application looks like. Basically, if you go to network and refresh, you can see it's making this call to /4200 to get the products, right? Yeah, so that's easy, right? So we have our application running. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the steps of how to move this to Docker, right? So once again, we go back to a backend application. Now, the first thing you want to do would start off with a backend, right? Now, the first thing you want to do always is to start off with a Docker file, right? So we have a Docker file, which would create in the root of our backend directory, right? And basically, I'll just walk us through the commands, right? Now, every Docker file starts with a base image. Now, remember, before we even start talking about the commands, now, the Docker file, it's like, think of it like a set of instructions, a set of specifications, right? That's the scripts you have here, like a set of instructions which will be executed while you're building your image, right? So the first thing we want to start off is to say, like a base image, what should be the default runtime? So we know that we want to have like Node.js installed. So I'm picking Node 18, right? Once again, if you're writing Python or something, you would always start with some sort of base image. Now, once we've started the base image, once we have the base image, the next step we want to do is to set a working directory inside the container. So when the container starts running, this should be where our code would live, right? That's called a working directory. And the next step would be to copy our package, the JSON, and then we would install dependencies. So you run npm install. So copy package.json and package lock.json, and then we run npm install. And once we have that, we would copy our application code. Basically, this is going to go into this directory, and it's going to copy everything here into this directory, right? Now, if you are someone who is like a curious person, you're probably wondering, like, rather than just copy the package.json first and then install, why not copy everything and just install? So here's the reason why they do this usually. When Docker builds this image, it's going to build them in layers, right? So what happens is that it tries to cache like each layer to optimize the next build. So what happens is first, when you copy your package.json and you install the dependencies before copying your application code, the next time you run like a build, Docker is going to check the cache. Has anything changed with the package.json, right? If no, right, then this layer doesn't really run, right? It just goes to the cache and gets like the installed dependencies. So if you changed your code, right, you're not having to reinstall again if all you changed was your code. And this helps to optimize your build. It's going to make your build faster, right? Now, I also think that this is also like outside that reason, I also think that this is common sense, right? Now, when you're building an application, you always would install first. And also it's good to know that your packages are like, you have your packages well installed. So if something goes wrong, you're aware at that point, right? So once we've copied our code, we now have our code inside this working directory. The next step would be to build the application. So we run the command. So we tell Docker to run this command, npm run build. That's going to build our application. And now we're going to expose the port, right? Remember, if we go back to main source, we go back to main, our application is running on port 4200. So we're exposing that port to the external environment. Now remember, when this is going to run, right, the essence of containerization, that this is going to be its own environment. So this container is going to be like its own environment. Now for services outside to be able to access this, we need to expose like a port, right? So, and then the command to start the application, right? So we need to run the application. So this is basically it, right? So we've created our Docker file. The next step would be to build an image based on the Docker file we've created, right? So first, let me show you something here. Now, when I build the image, if you see there's nothing on our backend service, just take note of what the image is here. When we build, we should see it on this list, all right? So the command to build the image, let's go to our terminal. Okay, I'll just open like a new tab. And let's see, okay, I'm in clients. I want to go to the backend because I'm building the backend first. So I said cd dot to go back. Ls, I'll go into the backend directory. So I cd into it. And now I'm going to run the command to build the image. Now let's just do ls first. Now, so there's a Docker file, right? Inside that. So what is going to happen? You're going to say Docker build, right? It's given an instruction Docker to build an image, and you add a tag, right? So this tag is like, think of it like, so there's something used to identify the image when it's built. So I would say product backend, the service, right? And I would give Docker context. So basically what I'm telling Docker is that Docker built an image called backend service. Now, for Docker to build an image, it needs a Docker file. So how does Docker know where to get it? So go to this current directory, go to this context. So Docker is going to look within the current directory and it's going to find a Docker file. And based on that Docker file, it's going to execute like a set of instructions in that file. So if I hit enter, the process to build starts, right? And once again, if you follow this process to build, you see that it's just doing that. It's like loading the metadata for the image, the base image, which we talked about. And yeah, that's the same thing you see. So it's creating the working directory as we specified. It's copying the package.json, it's installing first. Then eventually it copies our code, it runs build. So I told you that Docker builds in layers, so you could see that. And yeah, so it does finish building our image. So if we go back to, so I could, let's just check the graphical user interface. So if I go to Docker desktop, you'd see now that we have like a new image on the image. If I click image here, on the list of images on my machine, I have the Docker, that's the image, the product backend service image I just built, and you see the time when it was built, right? And of course, as a size, we'll talk about optimizing images later in a different section, right? Yeah, and so that's a list with other images I built and I worked on a while ago, right? So there's a C. So this gives us an overview. Now, normally if you didn't have the Docker desktop, what you would have done is say Docker image ls, I think, and this would list all your image. So if you see it here, we have like the list of images which corresponds to this, right? Yeah, I mean, if you're developing locally, this just saves you the stress and you can get like a quick overview, right? Okay, cool. Now we have an image, right? But an image is just like a blueprint of what our container is going to be. Currently, nothing is running, right? So once again, with the user interface, you could quickly just come here and just say run, and it's going to run the container, right? And then we're going to be able to access like a running version of our application. But I'll do that from the terminal because I think that's what a lot of people will be familiar with. So to run an image, to spin up a container based on our image, I'll say Docker run. I would create like something like a port. This is a port, and this is 4200. So I would explain this. So we're telling Docker to run the image, that's to run a container based on that image. This -b is specifying the port. So this is like a port mapping, like the external environments, right? Is going to be port 8080, and we're mapping it to the ports that Docker has exposed, right? So if you check in our Docker stuff, here we expose the port, right? So this port is internal. Docker is exposing 4200, and we're mapping it to port 8080. So if you need to like access this from my machine now, you say localhost port 8080, and that's how you're going to reach out this port. And once we have that, and the next thing we need is the image ID. So which image do we want to show this? So that's ID. I'll copy the ID. Right? You don't need to like store these commands in your head. You can get them from the internet every time, right? What you just basically need to know is that you have to know the steps. First, you have a Docker file. The Docker file is going to be like the set of instructions from which you build an image. And once you have an image that you've built, you need to like run a container from it, right? So if you check here now, we have our Docker container running, right? Once again, if you come to the Docker graphical user interface, Docker desktop, you see that the Docker product is running. It started 25 seconds ago. It's just started, right? So let's see if we can access this from my browser, right? So I'll just copy the port. I'll go to my browser, right? Now, this is the one that's outside Docker. This is the one in Docker. So let's say localhost. See, I think I have that already. So you see, so we are getting this basically from Docker, right? So this is like a containerized version of our application, right? Great. So yeah, that's it for you on Docker. I'll just show you one more thing. Basically, I'm going to try to go into the container. All right. So what I want to do now is I want to like SSH into the container, basically open like a bash terminal so we could check the container with us built. So let's say that doesn't matter. So you could list the containers you have on your machine. Say docker with this command docker container ps. This works, right? On our thing, I usually just do from top of my head docker container ls. You see, it's almost like the same thing, right? Now, once again, you don't have to store these commands in your head. You can always get them from the internet if you forget, right? But basically, to do that, I need to execute a command on the to go into the container and to execute a command on the docker container. So I'll say docker exec to execute a command -it, right? And so which container do I want to execute this command on? It's this. I could use the container ID. Or you could use the container name, right? But let's just take the container ID. Let's see. And what do we want to say? I want to open like a bash terminal, right? So if I say enter now, right? So you see it takes us directly to like the root directory of the where our app is. So if I say ls, you see that we have our app copied exactly as it is on our machine. Like, yeah. So if I go to VS Code, basically you see that's the same thing, right? We just basically copied the application, right? So if, for example, just to see cd src ls, let's just say cat to open main.ts. I just want to list the contents of this file, right? So this is exactly our code, right? You know, basically we just, so once again, we've copied our code into like an isolated environment that's running on our machine. So this is, for lack of better words, I said, think of it as like a different computer within our computer, right? And so if you check, you have like, you could say like node to check the node version, like node-v, right? npm-v, right? So you could perform commands that you perform like on a Linux Linux environment here, right? Right. So that's what this is, right? All right, friends. So we've succeeded in Dockerizing or putting our backend application in Docker, right? As I say, it, right? The next step would be to like do the same for our front-end application, right? So we have the backend container running. So to put our what's it called? To put our, let me see. So to put our clients, web clients. So to put our web clients in to containerize our web clients, we go through the same process, right? So you just like say create a Docker file in the root directory as always, right? Now basically I'm just going to just copy the command since we've gone through them, right? I don't run quickly through it. So as always, you have like a base image. Now, once again, it's a React application, so we need Node installed and Node having the basic Node.js runtime. We have the working directory. As always, we're copying the package.json. We're installing dependencies, then we're copying our code. All right, so this way it gets like a little bit different, right? So what I'm doing here is that I'm updating my env file within the Docker. That's when we get into the container. I'm updating my env file, so it uses the URL of the service side. Now this time is going to come. Now there's an initial URL which is on localhost, and that's 4,200. This is for the one on local this one on my machine, right? But here I wanted to use the one from Docker, right? So the containerized version of the application, right? So I'm creating, I'm like updating my env file to use that latest version, right? Now this is just like a hint. Now there's several things you could do, right? So for example, this you could want to like maybe say have a command that goes to like AWS Secret Manager. Just for an example, this is not the right command, but let's say AWS Secrets Manager, Transparent Manager, and say get secret values, right? Get secrets and stuff. So that would be like run, right? Maybe get a particular secret and stuff like that. So you could also like get values from your maybe pipeline and then like environment value variable. So normally sometimes people don't want to like put this pair here, so you could get the steps you could do to like get this from your when you're running your pipelines and stuff like that, right? But the idea is that once again, it's not for you to like store these commands in your head, it's to understand the concept. The idea behind it is that on your Docker file, when it's executed, you can run several commands. So think of commands you would run if you were in a Unix environment, like to maybe communicate with something. Think of commands, maybe if I wanted to create a directory, let's say something like make directory and everything like that, right? So you could always just run commands, right? Right? And so that's how when you think about this, right? Not to store these stuffs in your head, but also think about this is like a Unix environment. I want to run and execute certain commands. And lastly, right, we run the build command to build the stuff, the build the application, and now would run to start the application, right? So once again we have our Docker file, the next thing we'll do is the same process to build an image from the Docker file. So I'll go back to the terminal. Okay, I think I can do it here. Let's just clear the screen. So we want to build for the client. So I say ls, I'll go into clients because that's where my Docker file is for the client, right? And once again, the same command, I'll say docker build, right? And add a tag. So this is what our image would be tagged with, product. Let's call it product web client because this is like the web client. And once again, I'll tell Docker to check within the current directory because if you check, as I said, our Docker file is on the root of our web client, right? So it's going to go within that place and it's going to look for that when you hit enter. And based on that, it's going to go through the same process and it's going to build your image, right? All right, guys, we'll just like wait for this to build. All right, guys, we're back. Once again, we've built like the image for the client, and if you check once again, the steps are the same thing. You know, like get the base image, get a working directory, and all those things. So if I should go to Docker desktop, right? You could let's say Docker image ls. So now we have like a web client, right? Once again, rather than run that command, this is just faster. I could just go to Docker, the graphical user interface, and I see that we have like a web client, right? Now, once again, you need to run. So we have our image now, right? So normally you'd come here and say Docker run. You'd specify ports, right? The ports that the external, and that's the external ports, right? And the port that you exposed, right? Our Reactor application is running on port 3000 within Docker. That's this. And this is the port we want to. So our Reactor application is running on port 3000 within Docker. We're mapping that 3000 to an external port 3002, right? So that outside our container, you make a GET request to this port and you can access this, right? And once again, we have the image ID, right? And that would have like a running container. Okay. So our container is running, right? So now, how do you assess this? Remember, we exposed this port. Now, this port to the external, or let's just say the outside world. And so if I go to my browser, so, and say 3000, now you see that the application runs fine, right? So let's just inspect to be sure we're making the GET request to the right place. Yeah, so if you see, as always, now so we have a front end that it's running on Docker, and we are making like a GET request to another application that's the backend service running in Docker. So basically, this is a summary of how you would Dockerize a full stack application, right? So yeah, those are both containers, your web client, your backend service running. All right, guys. This was it for this session. In the next section, I'm going to be telling you about Docker network because basically, rather than go through the steps, you could just create like a network and put containers communicate with themselves, right? And we'd also look into Docker Compose, how to like streamline your Docker files and stuff. Yeah, thank you and see you then. Bye.